Returning listeners, new listeners, welcome to the new SEC podcast. I'm Randall Ledet Jr.,
I'm Hunter Ziesman.
and we're excited to give you a preview of the Week 3 upcoming slate coming here on Saturday. Tons of thoughts from Week 2, a lot of fun. If you listened to our recap, you saw how we felt about Tennessee's domination and Texas's domination, and Arkansas's really showing us something on the offensive side. But, what were some of your initial thoughts just or coming out of Week 2 as we reflect to get here to Week 3?
Yeah, I mean, on a personal side, it's a good week for me when Alabama wins and Auburn loses. So I had fun. And my heart rate's still coming down from the Alabama game. But other than that, it was good to see, Texas's strengths, see Tennessee's strengths, finally seeing some of these teams match up against Power 4 opponents that are closer to equal, even though they showed that they were more dominant on the field. So we have another week of good games coming up. But week 2, I'm starting to really feel like we're hitting stride in the football season.
Yeah, no, definitely. And like you said, we're kind of getting past some of these group of 5 games or FCS games, and we got to see a couple Power 4 games last week. Oklahoma State and Arkansas definitely got my blood pressure up and got me excited. That was definitely a game I was flipping back to, going back and forth between that and Texas. And somehow the Texas team had ski masks on the side in the locker room, and that's the fun of college football, right? These guys are between 18 and maybe 27 now, but for the most part, 18 to 22, and they're just having fun, just being kids and playing football. So that was a fun sight to see from Quinn Ewers or Quintavious Ewers, depending on what haircut he has or what shiesty mask he has on.
Right. It's fun. The fun parts of football, and I love upsets. We talked about it in our recap episode. I didn't expect South Carolina to come out as strong as they did. So anytime we get an upset game like that, who knows, maybe Kentucky this week. I don't know. We'll see. But I'm looking for more upsets, looking for big games. It's fun. College football is fun.
College football is fun, and it's on Saturday. There's another day left on the weekend, so you get to really just enjoy it, soak it in, stay up late, eat the food you want, drink the beverages you want or don't want. But for this episode, we're going to go around the SEC to start, look at the Week 3 slate. I firmly believe, hands down, the SEC has the best schedule this week compared to the other conferences, and I can tell you why. Then we're going to do some game breakdowns. You guys loved the game breakdowns last week. Oklahoma State and Arkansas, drew a ton of view, and of course Mississippi State and Arizona State. The Sun Devil fans had a lot to say, and the Mississippi State fans showed a lot of love. So we're going to give you guys some breakdowns of some of the top games this week, with LSU versus USC, Georgia, Kentucky, as well as others coming up here in the slate. But Hunter, man, really excited about what we're going to be talking about here today, and I think the listeners and viewers are in for a great show.
Yeah, definitely in for it. And before we really break it down, just at a glance, the whole SEC has some good games. You mentioned the big ones, like we're going to be talking about Georgia, Kentucky. I've already started to pick out the ones on Saturday for me that are going to get TV primetime, and ones that are going to be on the split screen iPad or triple box with YouTube TV. Like, I'm excited for Alabama at noon. I'm going to lead into Texas, Florida at 3:30, and then I got Georgia, Kentucky at 7. But other than that, there's still a ton of games that catch the eye.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of games that really catch the eye, and of course, like Florida and A&M. I am enamored with the 3:30 p.m. time slot for SEC games. I feel like it's the right slot. I don't care if the game's on CBS like it was in the past or on ESPN these days. There's something about that late afternoon. It feels like the real men are playing at 3:30. Like, the Big Ten kind of owns that 12 p.m. slot, and the Big 12 plays on Fridays and early Saturdays, but that 3:30 p.m. slot's the main one. And so I'm excited to see what Florida can do versus A&M, and this will be A&M's first trip to the Swamp in several years. As you know, with the lack of divisions, this is going to be a new game coming up here. So that's one game I'm looking forward to.
It is, and at noon, there's still some big games. Alabama has that Big Ten noon kickoff spot, but we have game day going to the 3rd straight week of SEC football. With LSU and South Carolina. So there's a lot to look at there too, because we're going to get to see another, SEC school show the culture, the people out there with the signs and the fans. And it means more in the SEC, but there's the big games, LSU, South Carolina, Alabama. We have Missouri and Boston College. Bill O'Brien, former SEC guy, now making his way back down. to play against Missouri, Texas, Florida, but there's still other games that I'm interested in what happens. Tulane and Oklahoma being one of them.
Yeah, Tulane and Oklahoma is one I'm definitely interested in, especially seeing how they played last week. Tulane being against Kansas State, who's supposed to compete for the Big 12 championship. Kansas State was able to slip out of Yeoman Stadium with a dub. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what Oklahoma can do, trying to bounce off of a kind of anemic offensive performance last week. So that one's definitely going to catch my attention. I also feel like when I'm looking at the schedule, Ole Miss is playing their first Power 4 opponent. Wake Forest is coming off of a loss to UVA or Virginia, and Ole Miss is trying to keep the ball rolling here. They're going to need a lot of style points when you look at this schedule early on in the season to continue to hold that spot as other teams start to play tougher opponents throughout the season that could potentially find them leapfrogging them. But for Ole Miss, focusing on what's happening right now, you're playing Wake Forest, you're on the CW, ACC country things. That could be definitely an intriguing one.
Yeah, I want Ole Miss to play somebody good, but you can only play the guy in front of you. It's not the team who did the schedules, but Wake Forest, I'll take it. It's it's better than who they've been playing the past 2 weeks, and we'll get at least a truer showing of what they look like. I mean, down the road from you, Vanderbilt's coming to Atlanta. They're playing Georgia State, and they're only 11, 10-point favorites right now. I think Vanderbilt goes in there and takes care of business. This is their first road game now with Diego Pavia at quarterback. So that's a fun one to watch. They're a fun offense. We got to see the early end around, handoff, pass play for the first touchdown in the game last week. So whether you're a Vanderbilt fan or not, if you like good football, they're playing interesting. So I want to see that one too and see them show that they can cover that 10-point spread.
Yeah, definitely want to see them cover that 10-point spread and ideally blow it out, right, for the SEC. Diego Pavia is actually top 10 or top 15 in rushing yards as a quarterback. So his offense leads to that with that kind of RPO type offense, but should be an interesting one. They're going to be playing at the old Turner Stadium. So for any listeners here in the Southeast that are familiar with where the Braves used to play, the Atlanta Braves, that Georgia State plays at Turner Field. So that'll be a fun one under the lights. And then, I'm looking at the schedule. I think the headline for Auburn has to be, who are we coming out to be this game?
Yeah.
Are we strong like Alabama A&M, or are we kind of, moving slowly like we saw against Cal? So for Auburn, they don't have to go on the road for the first 5 games of the season, but this is an important bounce back game.
It is. You can still lose at home. They don't have to go on the road. They can stay at home. And we've seen that they haven't been historically successful against teams from New Mexico. Shout out Diego Pavia from last year. So, this is an 0-2 New Mexico team, not like New Mexico State last year. I think Auburn gets it back on track. But we do get to see, the backup quarterback there, Hank, take some snaps. And maybe down the road, if he could take the job from Peyton Thorne, I think they're going to roll with Peyton Thorne for the long run. But Hugh Freeze says both guys will get some playing time this week. So I'm interested to see that in the New Mexico game.
Definitely. And you know how I feel. I always want to see the SEC go undefeated, and unless they're playing each other in conference. And I think we got about 10 out of conference games. And so, teams like Mississippi State are going to be looking to rebound off that loss against Arizona State. And they have a, pretty seemingly not as competitive opponent with Toledo out of the MAC. I think it's a really good test. The MAC usually has pretty well-coached teams, and I would expect Mississippi State, from a talent perspective, to be able to handle that. Hopefully, we see some improvements from the rushing offense side. They gave up about 268 yards in rushing last week, but a good opportunity for Blake Shapen to show out. The fans of Starksville can show up for a measly amount of $5 or more to go to the game, but that'll be a fun one. And then another team that's playing against a yellow and blue team is Tennessee. I would be lying to you if I said this was an interesting game, but I think it is another opportunity for us to see what Nico can do. He seems like the type of guy, if he just continues to warm up, that he'll be ready for some of these bigger opponents coming up here in the next following weeks.
Yeah. I want to see Mississippi State, bounce back. I think Toledo is a good opponent to do that against, because it is a team that is at least they're competent. They do have a shot here. Mississippi State only 11.5-point favorites. Tucker Gleason, averaging 3 touchdowns a game for Toledo over the first 2. But I think this is a good opportunity for Mississippi State to get back on track. Tennessee to continue to do what they do. But really good games all around. We get to see Arkansas again against UAB.
Yeah,
Gonna be a good week.
it can be a good week. I mean, you could argue that Taylor Green's one of the most exciting quarterbacks in the conference if you haven't watched him. And
Mhm.
Jaquindon Jackson's second in the conference in yards as a rusher. So coming from Utah, so that's always impressive to see from a portal guy making the jump to the SEC. So good opportunity to kind of brush up on their skills against UAB. UAB at one point didn't have a team. Now they have a team. They're in the AAC, so they're respectable group of 5 opponent. And then, I think the story might be more for UTSA than Texas, but UTSA is trying to bounce off of a like 49, 10 loss to Texas State. So we'll see what they can do against Texas. They're still a little brother, of course.
That's right. I mean, with that, we can go ahead and get into some of the big games. Like we hit on pretty much everybody, at a high level. Any other games that got you excited for Saturday?
I mean, if I had to rank them, we're going to do our previews with LSU versus USC and Georgia versus Kentucky, Alabama, Wisconsin, Missouri versus BC, and Texas A&M versus Florida. So outside of those 5, I would say that Tulane, Oklahoma is an interesting game.
Okay.
I would say that Ole Miss, Wake Forest, and then probably Vanderbilt and Georgia State. Vanderbilt, Georgia State is a game for me when I think about the power rankings, where Vanderbilt can kind of continue to solidify where they are and build up to be stronger when it comes to moving up. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you. I like Tulane, Oklahoma is a good one. Vanderbilt, Georgia, Georgia State, and then I want to see Toledo and Mississippi State too. Big game this week, game day. Going to South Carolina, going to Columbia. They shocked us last week against Kentucky. I wasn't expecting it, but we saw a defensive performance that is hard to compare to anyone else. I mean, they gave Brock Vandagriff a pretty bad day behind the Kentucky O-line. LSU with a super competent quarterback we saw against USC. They're going to be on the lookout for this USC, South Carolina D-line to put some pressure on them. How are you feeling for this game?
Yeah, and I think you started off on the right point. I feel pretty good about this game. I love the noon kickoff time. I love that College game day's there. And you talked about that defense that was super stout last game. Dylan Stewart, it has to be the highlighting point. He's got 2.5 sacks on the year as a defensive end. He's a true freshman. So he is easily and quickly climbing up the ranks in terms of a top freshman in the country. And really what I believe LSU might not necessarily be prepared to see is this pass defense, right? USC right now is top 20 in terms of passing yards per play get given up. So they play a pretty stout defense, and they have not also seen a quarterback like Garrett Nussmeier. So that'll be an interesting kind of matchup and battle between those two sides, right? The SC defense versus what Garrett Nussmeier could do on the passing side.
Yeah, he looked solid, especially at the beginning there in the game against USC Southern California. He was really tearing them apart before they did this weird transition to run the ball a lot more. In that game, Xavier Thomas, they needed to get him more involved. In that game, he only touched the ball, 6% of plays. Kyron Lacey up to 16. But those are two guys that if you can get them going early against South Carolina, you can really blow this game up. Because we have seen that accuracy from Nussmeier, we have seen what they're able to do. Where the offense falters a little bit is the red zone attack. We saw them not take the points. We saw them miss a couple more times in the red zone and settle. You don't want to do that here in South Carolina. You have to capitalize on your drives. Take the points when you get them, but really try to put it in the end zone.
Yeah, and really when it comes to scoring in the red zone and scoring in general, you talked about Kyron Lacey. So Kyron Lacey leads the SEC in touchdowns, receiving, of course. And you ultimately need to get the ball to him in the red zone. That should be your safety blanket, your safety net. Obviously there's a time to try to take that risk if you see a touchdown opportunity versus a field goal to maybe carry momentum. But I think in this game you play it safe. South Carolina seems like the type of team that you don't want to let hang around. They are I think top 20 or top 30 in terms of red zone scoring in the country. And while a lot of their opportunities have come at the point of turnovers recovered, they're still able to finish in the red zone. So if LSU is not able to finish and South Carolina is able to finish, this could be a much closer game than LSU might want it to be. I think where South Carolina has an advantage from an offensive perspective is the run game.
Yeah.
John Emery, who got hurt week 1, is still the rushing leader for LSU. So they're expecting more to come out of Josh Williams and Caleb Jackson, or John Emery, of course, talking earlier. But there's an opportunity for LSU to drive more in the run game. Otherwise, USC can realistically probably rush 3 or 4 and just kind of run a nickel to be able to try to lock down Kyron Lacey, who's also, again, playing really well this season. So.
Yeah, you gotta score. We've seen LSU trying to get this rush offense together. South Carolina rushing 65% of the time. So we have the two sides of the spectrum here. The importance on stopping South Carolina, like their offense isn't super dominant at South Carolina. They were able to make things happen against Kentucky, but it was mostly because of field position. They're starting way closer. They have super short drives. They're starting on their 37 yard line where, if LSU can score consistently, they're pinning them back, within the 25, hopefully. And that's going to be a huge thing here to slowing down South Carolina, is force that offense to work, force Sellers to make tough passes, because we know the quarterback tier here, I would say Nussmeier is a little bit better at building a sustained drive, completing passes, stringing it together. We saw how good they were at 3rd downs and 4th downs in that first game of the season. But it's a must-win game for LSU. You can't go into the season 1-2 with your only win being against Nicholls, who you gave up 20 points to. So this is a huge one for LSU, a huge one for Brian Kelly. I mean, another road test with College Game Day there, flashy lights, it's on the line. They're 7-point favorites. So yeah. I mean, I like LSU's chances here. I think it'll be tough for South Carolina to replicate that defensive performance they did last week.
It will be, and I think you talked about the bright lights, and William Bryce, right? We haven't necessarily talked about the LSU defense, so we know what we can come to expect from the LSU offense. Garrett Nussmeier is a top 5 quarterback as of right now in the SEC statistically, and on the defensive side for LSU, I think the main story in the offseason was Harold Perkins. Is he going to play standing up? Is he going to play with his hand in the dirt? And he has been able to, find himself all over the field, finding himself second in tackles. You look at other players such as safety Major Burns and Greg Penn. Brian Baker has this defense rolling, but it feels almost deceptive because they still are last in the SEC in yards given up. This could potentially pose challenges when it comes to the running ability, not running skill yet, but ability that we see from USC with Lenore Sellers, who clearly takes a ton of carries, and Raheem Sanders, who is their leading rusher and is running at a pretty solid clip. So that two-headed monster between Lenore Sellers and Raheem Sanders could pose a challenge to this LSU defense. And so I'm not concerned about LSU's offense being able to score when they need to. I think the USC defense will be able to make stops, but it's more so what can this offense put together against a defense that's still kind of trying to figure it out. They have the players that we've seen an improvement, but it's hard to really judge the improvement just yet off of 2 games and 1 game against an FCS opponent in Nicholls State. So I think overall it'll make for an interesting game. I mean, I'm ready to hit predictions if you want to hit predictions.
Let's do it. I mean, it's LSU or 7-point favorites. We got College Game Day there. The over-under 52.5. I got it. I don't want to be just riding the fence on the Vegas odds here. I like 23-17 LSU winning at South Carolina.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I'm going to take 31-13 LSU winning. This would be the 8th straight win for LSU, dating back to 1995. The last time this game was played, TJ Finley was the quarterback for LSU. And Colin Hill was the quarterback for USC, who I'm not fully sure who that is, but I do know TJ Finley is still playing college football.
Yeah.
But in terms of my pick, I like it 31-13. I think LSU finds a way to hit a stride here on offense. And I think we still see some of these struggles when it comes to the defense. And I believe that just based upon the turnover woes that we've seen over the last couple of games for USC, I can't imagine how LSU doesn't force a turnover or 2 as well this game.
In Kentucky, the South Carolina's opponent from last week, coming off of an awful week with 2 field goals, only in having a hard time getting the ball through the air, they host the Georgia Bulldogs, who are looking strong. I mean, they're number 1 in the country. going into the season, I thought this was going to be a really good game, but it still could be. I mean, how are you feeling about Kentucky's chances here?
Yeah, the way when you phrase the question is how do I feel about Kentucky's chances? I'm really focused on Kentucky making the game competitive.
Okay.
I feel like where they can look to strike improvement is keeping Brock Vandergriff off his back. Right, he's been sacked 3 times this year. I think that's top 5 in the SEC in terms of sacks. The rushing game is pretty decent. Dane Key's their leading receiver, so like to see more out of Barry and Brown from a yards perspective. But he has 2 touchdowns in the season. So what I expect and what I'd like to see from Kentucky is a slight improvement on the offense. The opposition and the challenge is that they're trying to go against one of the best top pass defenses in the country. You saw it in week 1. Malachi Starks was able to force a pick on Cade Klubnik. The Georgia defense right now is giving up less than 80 yards a game in the air. And so you might think, okay, they played Tennessee Tech last week. They played Clemson week 1, and they held Cade Klubnik to 130 passing yards. I don't know what Brock can do against that passing defense. And that passing defense also happens to be familiar with him because he played there last year as a backup. So it really is an interesting matchup when you look at some of those data points.
It is for sure. And last week, he only completed 3 passes of his 10 attempts. Not great. A lot of that was because of the pressure that was being put on him. So it wasn't really him being able to sit in the pocket and make reads. I don't think that Georgia gives him that opportunity. They have, their share of pass rushers. If for whatever reason he's able to at least complete a couple more passes and open up that run game. Last week, Kentucky was able to pick up any drive that they had that wasn't a 3 and out or, a 4-play drive came from first downs from rushing the ball. So they're able to pick that up, but you have to be able to open up the game with the passing. Georgia, a team that's tough to do it on. But what I'm looking for Kentucky is to maybe find that balance, complete a couple passes, figure out ways to get the ball out of Vandegrift's hands earlier. With Georgia, it's trying to come out fast. From Clemson, I think the big question that people had and why they kept the game on for so long in a game that on the box score looked like a blowout was because they took so long to get started. The offense took a little while to start firing. I don't know if it was because ETN was out or it's just week 1. But I think I want to see Georgia come out a little bit faster this week.
Yeah, and I think that the return of ETN should help with that, right? He is currently at, I want to say it was 78 yards, but it's on 5 carries. Mm-hmm. And of course, that was against Tennessee Tech, but the leading rusher on the team, Nate Frazier, is averaging 6.5 yards per carry. Georgia is known as RBU for a reason. So if they want to come out fast, those 2 guys have to be the ones. And I know what you're thinking as an Alabama fan. You're like, hey, we got running backs over here too.
We got backs. We got backs. No, I got you. I got you. We'll see when Nick Chubb comes back this year. But no, they got some dogs over there in dog country.
They do got some dogs in their dog hunt country, but the current dogs are Nate Frazier and Trevor Etienne. That 1-2 punch, Nate Frazier kind of brings more of that explosive, north and south running ability, and Etienne does just about everything right. We understand where his brother plays. We get the genes. They're going to play a key role with them coming out strong. Carson Beck, he's supposed to be the top QB in the country. The bar is set by how he performed last year. The bar is set by people's expectations, and so he's looked pretty solid all year. I mean, 7 touchdowns. He's doing what he has to do. I think that kind of plays a role in why we look at the spread of the over/under being 45.5. Like Georgia, they won game 1 35-3. They won last week, I think 42-0. It's like they get to that 40-point mark and they're like, all right, like the game's well in hand. They have too much on defense. They smother you, but the opportunity, as you mentioned, is that running game for Kentucky. Dime Sumo Karngbaye, and if I butchered his name, I apologize, is a solid running back. He's averaging 5.2 yards a carry. He's 11th in the SEC in yards overall. But to your point, when you watched that game last week against USC, like he was kind of the main one falling forward, moving the needle to get, halfway to a first down per carry. So you need to see that kind of combined and going against this rushing defense for Georgia that hasn't shown that much improvement. Phil Maffa was able to run for 130 yards in week 1. So that's where I see Kentucky having a chance to put points on the board. Do they have enough to stop Georgia's offense and to really stifle Georgia's pass defense? I'd have to be seeing something that I just don't believe is going to happen.
Yeah. And I like Kentucky's defense too. Last week, I mentioned it when we talked about South Carolina. South Carolina was playing on a short field often, multiple turnovers. They were also, they were winning the field position battle. So Kentucky's defense was on the field way more than they needed to be and in compromising positions. So I think that Kentucky's defense is good. Can their offense keep them off the field enough? You mentioned the running game for Kentucky. You would see it would be 3rd and long, and they're still having to try to run for the first down because they just couldn't get anything going in the air. They had Dane Key doing cardio. So it's like you really want to get all your weapons involved because you have these guys that can. I don't see it happening. I'd be remiss to not mention the potential weather in this game playing a factor. We have the hurricane coming up through Louisiana right now. Like, best of thoughts to everyone down there in Louisiana and the team making their way up for South Carolina. But should there be inclement weather, rain and wind that's typical of a hurricane, right? It's going to be even harder. If you're 3 for 10 on sunshiny day in Kentucky, I think you're going to have a hard day in the pouring down hurricane weather.
Yeah, it's not going to be fun weather in Kroger Field, and it definitely makes it more of a running game. I think the field's turf, so it might help in terms of the potential muddiness, but it's definitely tough to pass in the rain. And I would expect Georgia to focus on the ground game as well if the game plays out that way. So when I think about my prediction for this game, I have it at 35-10. So that means I have this game falling the under just ever so slightly if things don't move. So what about you? What are your thoughts, man?
I'd like to see a shutout from Georgia here. I think the defense is capable of it. They picked up a couple of drives last week. Kentucky did to get some field goals. If we are playing in the rain, we're playing in inclement weather, I think the score is 34-0 UGA, and I'm going to roll with that.
All right. Dogs versus
Sorry,
cats.
Kentucky. Sorry, Kentucky.
Yeah. It's a tough one. It's a tough week 3 matchup. If you're Kentucky, at least you're happy you get Georgia out of the way. You weren't able to bypass that traditional SEC East rivalry game. Sorry. But it's like I said, I have Kentucky covering if things are the way they are, the way I see it today. But we'll see.
All right, it's time for my game of the week. Roll Tide, roll. Alabama in Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be jumping around.
Yeah,
it's I love it. We had a tough game last week. Alabama did, and they put it together at the end with a hodgepodge O-line. Wisconsin isn't bad, but after that game, the initial line was 7.5. It jumped to 15.5 after Alabama's close game. So people like Alabama here. I like Alabama here. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good. Spent a good amount of time scouting Wisconsin. Like I feel like we've talked about Alabama in the preseason episode. We've talked about Alabama in the preview for last week, the recap for this week. Everybody's harping on their penalties. Look, Alabama's averaging 10 penalties a game, which puts them at 120th in the country, and Wisconsin's averaging 3 penalties a game. But you know what Wisconsin is not doing is being effective on offense. Tyler Van Dyke has 1 touchdown in the season. Transfer quarterback from Miami, had a really good sophomore, junior season. Not as impressive as his last season, and made the move over to the offense in Wisconsin. This was supposed to be a high-powered air raid offense, and we're not seeing much going on in the air. On the ground, Wisconsin's known for guys like Monte Ball, Melvin Gordon, and they have a solid run game there. Their rushing leader's got 3 touchdowns of the year in Ches Maluzzi. So he's going to have to play a key role for Wisconsin to be in this game. Their opponents don't really impress me. 2 MAC opponents they played. So it's kind of, I'm going off the stats. I'm looking at who they played, and it just, the offensive side doesn't look that impressive. No. And I trust Alabama's defense. So what are your thoughts?
Man, I would like to see a good game from Wisconsin here. I think that they can do it behind that running back, Ches Maluzzi, like you mentioned, the year 6 guy coming off of 3 straight season-ending and season-shortening injuries. Broke his leg last year, broke his arm, the season before, ACL the season before. So hopefully he can get back. He's not playing at the same clip that he was last season before injury, because They brought in Tyler Van Dyke. They have second-year offensive coordinator Phil Longo there, who's trying to instill a little bit more of that passing offense from, like we mentioned, the Wisconsin that we know, which is bang, bang, run football. So they're hoping to develop that. It's not going ideally the way that they would like, low-scoring games against, Western Michigan and South Dakota State, or South Dakota, not South Dakota State. And, they did it with Tyler Van Dyke, who's at Miami, lost to Alabama. Head coach Luke Fickell is a great head coach. He was the first one to get a group of 5 team into the playoff, who played Alabama then. So both of these guys, the head coach and the quarterback, have experience playing against Alabama. They don't have experience against this Alabama team because there are those opportunities to take advantage of the undisciplinedness. Now, the reports are out that Caden Proctor will be playing in this game, or is at least trending towards playing. If that's the case, then I think Alabama brings out a bigger set of the playbook. They try some things that we didn't see them try against inferior opponents. So I'm looking forward to this one.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to it like you. And there's just so many storylines, like you said. Luke Fickell playing Alabama for the first time since the playoffs with Cincinnati, and Tyler Van Dyke, being able to face Alabama again since the time he played them at Miami. I think about just Caden Proctor. I'm sure he really wants to play in this game, right? He's a Midwest guy. He's from Iowa originally. Iowa's decently close to Wisconsin in the Midwest, so I'm sure he would love a lot of his family to go to this game and have him play in it, not just be at Camp Randall Stadium just to support the team, of course. But I think on the offensive side, Alabama's such a fun team to talk about, and no bias, right? It's the team that everyone loves to prod and poke at. And I get why, because the bar is so high, and I'm going to sound like a broken record all season. But I think there's a couple key points to this game, and the one thing I think about is everyone just wants Jalen Milroe to run the ball. Mm-hmm. Just run the ball, right? He's got 4 rushing TDs on the season, and when they need a big play, he always delivers. You saw it last week against USF. You saw it against Western Kentucky. Jam Miller equally has 4 TDs on the season. He's leading in terms of touchdowns in top 5 for the SEC there. They have a run statistic of running the ball 64.23% of the time. So they're doing what I guess fans think they should do. I think they just want to see more of it. And then so you're going to get the run game, Alabama fans. So, but I know you got something to say, Hunter. So what you got?
Well, I hear you, and I think that the run game is important, and we saw some unique ones, especially against Western Kentucky. The touchdown that Jalen Miller had with the fake pitch. They have these creative ways to get their run game involved. That makes me think that in these first 2 games, they don't have that all brought out. You feel like you're going to beat Western Kentucky, and you feel like you're going to beat South Florida. You're kind of planning for week 3 and 4 ahead of time. Yeah, they took the eye off the ball. They had the injuries last week. But I think we're going to see a little bit more of a designed playbook around Jalen Milroe this week. But there's nothing wrong with being super run heavy. They are run heavy. There's things to clean up there, though. 6 fumbles already this year with 4 going the other way. So there is that sloppy play, the penalties. We saw the O-line just not really being able to get there. Mm-hmm. But they, if they're running the ball, it's getting it done for them. They have 3 great rushers in their quarterback and their 2 running backs.
Definitely. And look, I agree. Like I said, I touched on it earlier with the penalties. You're sitting at 120 in the nation overall average-wise at penalties. Like, that's not where you want to be. That's not – penalties to me are not a stat based upon skill ability. It's about discipline. It's not profound, but it's not like you could look at a team's, past defensive ratings in their bottom 120 in the country. That just means they're not skilled. Penalties are about just doing the right things. And when you come off of having a leader like Nick Saban and everyone just respects him and he does things a certain way, you start to kind of raise your eyebrow and be like, what is going on here? Like, I'm cool with everything. The podcast, it's fine, whatever. But like, we got to take care of these penalties. We got to play good Alabama football here in Tuscaloosa. The last thing I kind of pointed to that Alabama fans should feel excited about is Ryan Williams. He's second in the SEC in yards, and it's only on 6 receptions. It's right behind Trey Harris, and Trey Harris has got 3 TDs, so it's you got to feel excited about him. The running game's there, so hopefully they can continue to put together on the passing side. I think on the other side, Wisconsin, from a defensive perspective, is a top 6 in the nation against the run. They're 23rd in the nation overall from a yards per game perspective, but those stats are misleading to me given who they played.
Yeah.
Wisconsin doesn't play teams like this unless they make the conference championship or they play Ohio State or Michigan. So this will be the best offense they've played in quite some time in Camp Randall Stadium.
Yeah, and the offense for Alabama, what they're extremely good at is red zone. They've scored a touchdown 7 of 9 red zone trips. And their opponents, they're only 1 for 6 scoring touchdowns in the red zone. Wisconsin 5 for 10, so they're doing okay at scoring, but you would rather have that 7 for 9 number. The key to the game, I think, for Wisconsin is Alabama right now, this defense that Kane Womack has put together, he's left a lot of his DBs on an island. We've seen it. We saw it last week where if Byron Brown had a little bit more accuracy, he had guys deep. He just missed them in stride. Alabama's trusting their DBs to be athletes. They're trusting that talent gap that they're going to be able to cover guys one-on-one, giving them more opportunity to bring pressure, blow up plays, have linebackers that roam. We've seen the Alabama linebackers this year be critical. Alabama's going to be missing one for the first 3 quarters of this game. If you're Wisconsin, you need to take shots deep. You're going to have those one-on-ones. If you try to nickel and dime Alabama the whole game, I don't think that's going to get it done. You're going to have to take some big shots, and knowing that you're going to have a lot of one-on-one matchup opportunities. And Tyler Van Dyke does have the arm. We know the air raid offense that they're trying to establish there. I think that we'll see that from Wisconsin, and hopefully, for their sake, that gives them some points.
Yeah, they've scored 6 touchdowns all season. That puts them at 3 touchdowns a game on the offensive side. Of course, they have defensive touchdowns, but give them a defensive touchdown. I don't know if 28 points is going to win this game for Wisconsin if that's what they put up. If I had to make a prediction on this game, I'm going to say that Alabama wins 28-10.
28-10. I like it. I don't know. They're 15-point dogs. I think now that they have the O-line back together, I think Alabama wins 38-13. I know that they can put it together in the fourth quarter. I think some of these points will come that way for both teams. But behind this proper O-line, knowing that Jalen Milroe will have the opportunity to go right like he likes to do, we will see a more improved Alabama team that will give them some momentum going into bye week before Georgia. It'll be a good game. Roll Tide.
Another game that we have kind of in that time window, it's our second only ranked on ranked matchup in the SEC, but the second ranked on ranked matchup across the nation this week is Boston College at Missouri. This will be Boston College's first Power 4 opponent this season. And Boston College or Missouri will be looking to continue their streak of not giving up any points on the season. So, Hunter, man, what are your thoughts for the formerly SEC East team in Missouri?
This is the highest they've been since 2013, ranked at number 6. So they're looking to get that ranked win here. I mentioned it when we were doing around the SEC and at a high level, but Bill O'Brien, the former offensive coordinator at Alabama, is doing a great job there at Boston College. He's brought new life to that offense and really helped the quarterback there, Castellanos, limit the mistakes he was making last year. We've seen what they were able to do against Florida State. We know this Florida State team this year is not very good, but all credit to Boston College at what they were able to do. And a big piece of that is not only the run game. I mean, not only the air game, but the run game is a huge piece. They have 3 running backs over 100 yards on the year. Everyone's involved. Quarterback's making it go on his feet as well. So it's a good Boston College team. It'll be a good test for Missouri.
Yeah, and like I said, the run game is really impressive. It speaks to the 262 yards per game they average on the rushing side. Or overall, and the rushing plays a huge role within that. Thomas Castellanos is one of the most mobile quarterbacks in the country. This will probably be the most mobile quarterback they'll play until they play Jalen Milroe a couple weeks later. It'll be a good test for Missouri's defense. I think on the offensive side, the story for Missouri has to be kind of where is Luther Burden at? The U.O. East right now is 5th in the SEC in yards with 179 yards on a couple and second interceptions at 16. But Luther Burden's only seen the end zone once. And no one's going to question it, right? There clearly are a ton of weapons there across the offense. They're running at a high-powered clip. They're obviously, I think they're averaging over 30-plus points a game. But this opportunity for Missouri comes from, when I look at the stats, they ranked 32nd in pass offense, and BC ranks at 100. in terms of yards given up at 272. So I'm expecting kind of like a coming out party for Brady Cook. Right now, he's behind people like Peyton Thorne in terms of yards on the season. So I expect to kind of see some more from the offensive side here from Missouri, given what we've seen from the BC defense and just a 2-game sample, of course.
Yeah, and the BC defense giving up such a high amount of passing yards in a game, that's coming from coverage, that's coming from DBs. What they're going to have to do in this game, knowing that Brady Cook is fairly accurate. He's had some mistakes in these 2 early games that they've played as far as accuracy and getting certain players involved, but they have the weapons. You're going to have to get pressure on him if you're Boston College. They did it against EJU last week. If they can do that here, they need to disrupt him before the ball goes out, because we know what the weapons for Missouri can do, given that 1-to-1. If they can get good release off the line, they're gonna have to stop them at the pass. But if they do, the running backs for Missouri are playing awesome. We talked about it. We talked about it in our preview. We've talked about it every week, replacing Cody Schrader, but Marcus Carroll and Nate Noel are doing a great 1-2 punch dual system, running back duo that really Missouri is going to be bringing it from every angle. It's going to be up to the Boston College offense to be able to respond.
Yeah, and like you said, I think you definitely can't underestimate what Missouri's doing in the run game. We'll see what Boston College can do. Castellanos is definitely not alone in terms of his abilities. They have a great running back in Ward who's got 132 rushing yards in the season and 1 touchdown. So we're just going to have to see. Like for Boston College, there's really not a lot of pressure on this game. You're in your first season with Bill O'Brien. Bill O'Brien took over like a pretty decent roster, but I think Bill O'Brien deserves a lot of credit for what we've seen him do at Alabama in the past with their offense, what we've seen him do at Penn State with Matt McGloin at quarterback. Taking someone who is, for all intents and purposes, was not like a true high pro prospect and making him a good Penn State quarterback. And so Bill is certainly building himself a resume in terms of working with what he has and really stretching the most out of it. Most of those guys in the Boston College roster probably couldn't get offers to Florida State. And you saw them play up to the competition in terms of skill to win that game very convincingly. So I don't think that Missouri should sneak or sleep on this game. The number 6 next to you can certainly be very empowering. But you got to remember, you just got to take one game at a time, and it's just the regular season. So
you do. And you got to look at Boston College from, you mentioned last season, the first year with Bill O'Brien. Now they started out the year last year 1-1. Quick trip to a 6-6 final, for regular season. They won their bowl game 7-6. Boston College did, but they've behind Bill O'Brien this year, starting out 2-0. They have the opportunity to win this game. Vegas doesn't think so, but Bill O'Brien his team is bought in, and you can tell that that's on the field. They're crushing it on 3rd down. They only had 1 penalty against Florida State. Teams like that are bought into the process. They're disciplined. They're doing the things on the field that you need to see from a team who can win top tier games. They beat Florida State. I don't think that they're resting on that at all behind him. I don't have the most love for Bill O'Brien because I don't think he was great at Alabama, but I think what he's doing here at Boston College is solid. Limiting the mistakes. Missouri, those 17-point favorites here for a ranked matchup is pretty high. What do you think? They're 89-0 right now if you count their first 2 games. No one scored on them, and they've put up 89 points. So, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I guess like I'm kind of thinking about that 17-point number like in terms of how I believe the game might go. Right. You look at Alabama, and I use this example because you think about it was 14-13, and then it was ultimately like 42-13, and it looked like there was a huge gap. I believe that Boston College will play this game closer than it might look if Missouri does win by 16. I could see it being a 14-14 game at half, and then Missouri's able to get 2 touchdowns and kind of hold that defensive stop for the rest of the game. So I don't know if that gives them the full 16-point spread, but I would say 31-14. Maybe I'm just kind of in love with that close to under, but I just feel like I don't know. It's like I'm trying to figure out if that spread is disrespectful or if it's more so speaking to, do they believe that Boston College has the juice to hang in for the entirety of the game and make it come down to a drive or 1 score?
Yeah. I mean, that's it. They're averaging just under 45 points a game, and they're giving up none. So it's like,
Yeah.
it's against inferior opponents, but how do you think a team like Boston College is going to compete? And, I think that my opinion is that Boston College is able to score here. Missouri is able to score more, and that's how you win football games. I got them 34-20. I have Boston College covering, but I'm not super confident about it. I'm going to stay away from it. I like what Missouri can do, but until I see them against somebody high-powered like Boston College, I'm going to wait on it.
It's understandable. So I think the skepticism is natural. Like I said, I like Missouri fans, Mizzou. Be happy. We're excited for what's going on in Columbia. Like I said, I think Hunter had them in his playoff bracket, if I'm not mistaken, for when the season started. This is a great slate to kind of get your season off and running, ramping up. I'm sure you would much rather appreciate this slate than what Kentucky got, for example. And so it should be a fun one. I know it's going to be a sellout. Look, I love Eli Drinkowitz. In Drink We Trust. So it should be a fun one out there in Columbia.
We're getting down to the wire here. We got the last game, and this is an inter-SEC matchup between two teams that have a lot to prove. They have a lot to put out there on the line, and that's Texas A&M heading to the Swamp.
Oh yeah, this might be my SEC game of the week. Sometimes when I'm picking the SEC game of the week for the new SEC podcast game of the week, I want to pick the game that I think is going to have the most offensive firepower or the most star power, the most interesting. And week one we picked Notre Dame versus A&M, and week two I think we picked the Texas Michigan. Yes, and that was the big top 10 matchup. And this week, you could pick LSU and USC, and we could mirror College Game Day for the third straight week. You could pick Alabama versus Wisconsin. But I something like I said at the beginning of the episode, something about that 3:30 p.m. kickoff time. These two teams have something to prove, and it's in the Swamp. Nothing is more SEC than going down to Gainesville, Florida. To me, it might not feel like it these days for Florida fans. But, some of the things that I really look at when it comes to this game is, you look at kind of what Florida's defense has got to be the glaring hole. They gave up, I think they're averaging about 385 yards a game given up. That stat's a little skewed because it was really just kind of based upon their performance against Cam Warren week one, which could be the best quarterback they play all season in terms of NFL prospects, potentially. But, Florida, we need to see more on the defensive side. And the other big headline, and Hunter, you could touch on it, is kind of like, where do they go at the quarterback position?
Yeah. Cam Ward, top tier. They're going to see, if you look at the Heisman ballot and you take off Ashton Jeanty at Boise State, Florida plays like all of them except for Jalen Milroe. They got Quinn Ewers, they got Carson Beck, they got Nico at Tennessee, Jackson Dart. Like, Florida has the gambit of quarterbacks to play against. And the question, though, is what do they do at their own position? Graham Mertz getting hurt in the first week, DJ Lagway playing in the second. Billy Napier said he doesn't care what the fans think, but it's tough to see where they're going to go with this. He mentioned it this week that they're both going to play. The intention was that both these guys play, but is that the right answer? I'll say I don't think Graham Mertz is Chris Leak, and I don't think DJ Lagway is Tim Tebow. So it's not going to work out that way if you try to incorporate it in that. But that's the look that they're going to give. It's going to be Graham Mertz to start, who struggled extremely in week one. DJ Lagway, who came in and was able to see slight success. Mertz is the safe play here, right? But if you want to win games down the stretch, I'm not sure Mertz will be able to get it done. The high ceiling of Lagway needs to be developed early. If you were there and you were Billy, what would you do?
Yeah, if I was there and I was Billy, and I'm playing with Florida on College Football 25, I'm rolling with the mobile quarterback.
All right.
I'm rolling with the freshman. I think I'm thinking about this in terms of how he played week two. He led the SEC in yards, 485 yards roughly, 3 touchdowns. I'm thinking about if there is a world where Florida does move on from Billy Napier, getting DJ Lagway playing time probably encourages him to stay there versus potentially entering the portal. Like if they can see a little bit of success, or he can see this glimpse of, okay, I like playing in the swamp. I like playing these SEC games. All right, like if there is a world where the coach goes away, DJ Lagway, I think, will have more confidence playing in this game. I think he gives you more of an exciting look to see what you can see in the future and what you can see right now. So that's who I would be rolling with. And I think just from a safety standpoint, if it's a toss up, why not sit the guy out for another week if he had a concussion a week ago?
Yeah.
I'm not a doctor, but another week with your head off would probably be pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, they have no more like bye weeks other than the actual scheduled bye weeks. Every week, this Florida team is fighting for a win. But I'll say I can defend Graham Mertz a little bit here. I think a lot of his problems in the first week were because of the pressure that Miami was getting on him. Going into the season, Texas A&M was that team that was going to be that high pressure, all power, star-studded defense. But I think that this Texas A&M defense is maybe not as good as advertised. One sack on the season. They played McNeese last week. Still only one sack on the season that came against Notre Dame week 1. And we've seen the big plays break out. It's not on the outside. Like I've seen some people saying, it's right up the middle. It's, Jadarian Price broke off that big one. Jeremiah Love right after in the Notre Dame game, giving up big running plays. If for whatever reason this Texas A&M defense keeps up that trend of not getting pressure on a quarterback, and you let Graham Mertz sit in the pocket, we know what he can do. He was great last year. Don't want to look at one sample game against, you mentioned stats don't necessarily, they just speak for that one game for the Florida defense. Same for Graham Mertz. He's accurate. He doesn't make a lot of mistakes. We've seen that development in his career. And if Texas A&M gives him that opportunity, then that's what I think is going to happen. He'll be able to complete some passes and start some drives like he wasn't able to do week 1.
Absolutely, and I love your defense of Graham Mertz. I think it's very warranted, and I put it in my notes. It's my first note here. This feels like a game where you sort of throw away the stats. Texas A&M played Notre Dame week 1. Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois week 2. So a lot of their defensive stats are based upon playing a Notre Dame team that they did a good job stopping, and then against a McNeese State team who is a they're a superior opponent to McNeese State, right? You look at their defensive stats; they're sitting at 36 in the country in terms of pass yards per game at 158. Graham Mertz will be the best quarterback they've played so far this season. And statistically, Riley Leonard should have been and could have been, but I just feel like it's not enough of a sample size to hang my hat on the defense just yet. It's not necessarily a scrutiny at them, but if I'm going to focus on a strong point, I need to see more than just that Notre Dame performance. And unfortunately, that was kind of negated with that NIU win over Notre Dame in terms of the week 2 matchup.
It was. I mean, Wegman looked better last week than he looked against Notre Dame when we're looking at the offensive side against Notre Dame. But again, that game's kind of hard to tell now with the NIU one. So Florida's not the only one with the quarterback problem. We have Wegman here who's coming into this game and needs to show off against that Florida defense. You mentioned that was a big question mark, a big vulnerability, a little bit undisciplined. They gave Cam Ward in week 1 the opportunity to continue drives that they stopped with pass interference penalties, personal fouls. Can Texas A&M take advantage of that? Connor Wegman needs to find stride. We've seen him be good. We need to see him be good now. This is the game where if he doesn't play well, the quarterback play on the other side of the ball will be better than him. Only 225 yards on the year so far. They have the running back tandem. They have Le'Veon Moss, who is solid. Amari Daniels, and I know you're a Cowboys fan, so EJ Smith, Emmitt Smith's son, out there getting it done for them. I think that they're going to take a little bit advantage of this Florida defense and be able to run. Florida's D-line is a little bit bigger. These are some good, solid running backs that have high motors. There's 3 of them.
Yeah, there's the three running backs, and I think when I think about for Florida, and I'm going to take the EJ Smith hook, and I'm going to put it back on Emmitt because Emmitt Smith went to Florida, and who I like at Florida is Eugene Wilson III to kind of help with Graham Mertz. He's got 191 yards in the season, freshman All-American from last season, trying to have a strong sophomore campaign, and so I expect him to kind of play a key role in this game. He's definitely someone to keep your eye on, and like I said, part of me just feels like you almost have to throw away the stats and just let the game play. Who the guys are. Both the quarterbacks need to see improvement. We need to see an identified strong wide receiver from A&M. And I think on the defensive side, A&M's defense has looked good. Florida's defense hasn't looked as good, but it's a 1-game sample size, and of course he looked good against Stanford. So it'll be an interesting one. It's going to be on ABC right after that South Carolina LSU game. So you won't have to change your channel too much and just kind of keep it rolling there.
Keep it rolling. And you mentioned a good point, and that's the A&M needing to develop a all-star receiver, and they're not doing Wegman any favors on the receiver side right now. Like, no one has really been showing out for him, and that's mostly the thing to look at there is the lack of separation. We talked about it in the week 1 preview. Over almost half of their yards coming after contact means the receivers aren't getting the separation that they need to be hit in open space. So Wegman is having to make those tighter reads. Speaks positives to the running backs who are able to break tackles. But wanted to bring that up. I mean, the bright side for both teams are the DBs. Florida's defense looking a little bit rougher up front in the last 2, mostly, against Miami. I don't want to really count the Samford game for too much, but the DBs are going to look as good as always. I want to see the Texas A&M defense to step up to what we were expecting for them preseason. We know Mike Elko is very good at creating unique, interesting, all-power defenses. We need to see that from the D-line. We need to see it from the linebackers. On Florida, we need to see good wide receiver play. We need to see good quarterback play. And we need to see good D-line play, getting pressure. They didn't get it in week 1. Texas A&M 4-point favorites.
Yeah. The spread is the closest because these two teams appear the closest. They were probably the 2 teams closest in my power rankings when I think about the last episode. And so I would say that I'm gonna give the nod. I'm gonna give the nod to Florida here.
Yeah.
I think they come out here at home. I feel like they put it together enough to win. I'm gonna take them 21-14 in the Swamp.
Okay, man. I hate we got a lot of the same picks here. It's interesting when we do this, man. I like Florida at home behind better quarterback play. I think it's going to take Connor Wegman a little bit longer to get it together. Man, I like Florida 24-17. I almost want to change it to disagree with you, but this is what I'm seeing. I think Florida got it 24-17 at home. They want to give the fans something in the Swamp to be happy about.
Yeah, I think for me when it came down to it, you heard my critique on defense, you heard a critique on offense. It's quarterback play feels somewhat even, but we kind of know more we'll get from Mertz. And so if it's a push, I'm gonna go with the home team in this one. I think Florida needs it more. Mm-hmm. I know Billy's players want it for him. I know they want it for themselves. And not to say that A&M doesn't want it, but it's the first year for Mike Elko. If they lose, I almost feel like you're almost desensitized to the overreaction of A&M fans. So it's like you're just used to, if you lose, it's going to be all hell breaks loose on Tex Ags forums. But if you win, it's like, okay, what do you got for me next? But I think for Florida, this one means a lot more. I think, it's in the Swamp, and they really want to prove something here in their first SEC game of the season.
They'll need it. I mean, both teams have a very tough road ahead. They play some tough teams in the upcoming weeks. Good one for them to develop on. Mentioned it, first SEC game for both of them. Looking forward to it. That kind of concludes the games of the week. Like we've broken them all down. Any other thoughts on any of these?
No, I always say no, then I keep going, but I wanted to bring this up. I was looking at one of the games and I wasn't sure if you were there at the time, but the last time Alabama played Wisconsin was 2015. Mm-hmm. Jake Coker, Derrick Henry, Kenyon Drake at AT&T Stadium. 35-17 domination. Were you watching that game? Were you at that game?
I wasn't at that one. I don't think. Maybe I was. I don't know. That whole time there at Alabama was kind of a blur. But I remember that year. I remember that Alabama team winning the national championship. I hope to see that type of team come out of this game again. Not the season opener, but I remember that game well. I was not in the stadium, but for some reason I want to say I was in Texas when I watched it.
Yeah, maybe you had some standing room tickets. Maybe that's what it was.
It could have been.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Maybe. But look, we love the SEC. We love talking about these games. Please like, follow, subscribe on YouTube, on Instagram, the new SEC Media on Instagram. We have our podcast on Spotify. So thank you so much for listening. We had a great time talking through this. And until next time, fans, take it easy.